back.
Yeah.
Took a little summer hiatus.
Yeah.
Yeah. But
we said we were changing for a summer schedule and then
disappeared.
Ghosted everyone, fell off the face of the earth. I blame Juliana because you had like 4 birthday parties and like 6 bachelorette parties and then baby showers and...
I love how it gets more extreme each time you tell it.
Yeah.
The number gets higher each time.
Well, yeah, you had like 15 bachelorettes. Although there was, because then I got sick, because was it last week?
Last week you got sick.
I had to leave work, my brand new fucking job, I had to leave work early on Thursday and then call out Friday, and I was just
and then you had to miss SmackDown. I know. Oh, SmackDown was so good. SmackDown was so good. McIntyre was there.
I'm so upset you got to be in the same building
Uso
as
was
his
there.
tits!
Liv Morgan was there.
Ugh.
And of course, Cody Rhodes was there.
Cody Rhodes!
Anyway, should we talk about this movie?
Yeah. Hi, everybody.
I guess the housekeeping is we're going to go back to the every other week schedule because now we both have jabs.
Yeah. Welcome to Okay But Listen,
a review podcast.
I'm Caitlin.
And I'm Juliana. And I forgot about the intro completely.
This week we're talking about Jojo Rabbit.
Yes, it came out in 2019 with Fox Spotlight, whatever that is. How do we do this? Do we do plot or do we do...
It's been so long. Go over the plot first.
This is what I meant to do today. I forgot. I was going to write down the plot, like point by point by point. I was going to be like, look how much I've advanced, Caitlin. I know how to do a plot summary. But I messed up. Okay, so this movie takes place in Germany in World War II, and it follows Jojo. He is a 10-year-old, and he's a Nazi youth kid, and his imaginary friend is Hitler. And it's about... The movie starts out with Jojo going to a Hitler Youth, like, kind of summer camp thing, where he's having a fun time at camp, and it has, like, these kind of insane undertones happening, where they're, like, burning books, doing mock war play.
Yeah, one of my favorite quotes is he's, like, talking about the art of blowing stuff up.
Yes. It's a funny scene, it feels very funny, and then the stakes become very real when Jojo is singled out for being a weakling. He can't kill a rabbit. Everyone starts mocking him for being as soft as a rabbit. And then to prove he's a strong guy, he steals a grenade. He does the grenade thing wrong, and it blows up in his face, and he becomes disabled and disfigured. Yeah. And so now he has to just kind of hang out at home with his mom. He can't be conscripted or enlisted because of his disabilities, so he's just, like, doing other kid things, like collecting metal, handing out pamphlets, doing other stuff that kids do in the war. And he discovers that his mom has been hiding a Jew in the attic. And it's kind of like him breaking down prejudice around that and them developing a relationship. And then his mom was never a fan of Hitler and is sneaky but kind of outspoken, and she gets caught and unfortunately is hung in a heart-wrenching scene. Mm-hmm. Jojo discovers that. And then the final battle takes place where we see Captain K in his full glory, and then Captain K does the ultimate sacrifice, which is very cool and very sweet. And then Jojo initially doesn't tell Elsa, the Jew living in his walls, that the war is over in a successful way, and then he changes his mind and they dance in the street, and it's sweet. Yeah. Did that work as a summary?
Yeah, that's long, a very good... Well, yeah, you're going to the plot. Good job. I'm proud of you.
Yay!
This is practice.
I've learned.
Yeah, so I had seen this movie before. I wasn't really, like, paying attention. I just kind of, like, when it came out, I was like, oh, everyone's talking about it. I'll, like, go in.
Yeah.
But, again, the nice thing about this podcast is I have to use my brain. Mm-hmm. And so watching it again this time for this episode, I really liked kind of going in and I was noticing things and picking up on things, which is always nice.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, like, I love the fucking camp is crazy, because it's, first of all, we love Sam Rockwell.
Oh my god, we love Sam Rockwell.
In this house, we love Sam Rockwell.
Sam Rockwell.
I hope he never does anything cancelable.
He doesn't have that ability.
Well,
don't jinx it, knock on wood.
He kind of is the washed up war hero. He's teaching the camp because, like, he was injured because, yeah, like, his eye doesn't work.
Yeah.
And his speech at the beginning where he's, like, talking to the kids is so funny. Where he's, like, he has some line, I wrote it down, where he was like, yeah, despite all of the things that you see in the news, apparently we're doing just fine in the war.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'll just kind of, there's so much information about this movie, I'll just kind of pepper it in as we go.
Yeah.
But Taika, one of the things that he's
supposed to be, like, written by Taika?
It was written and directed by Taika Waititi.
Okay.
He, like, gave different actors different touchstone movies to kind of get the vibe, and Sam Rockwell was Bill Murray in Stripes.
Okay. I've never seen that.
I've never seen it, but I know it's about a disillusioned, like, soldier.
Yeah, well, he definitely has those vibes.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, the speech he gives at the beginning is so funny because he's like, you men are going to learn things about, like, guns and grenades, like, blowing stuff up and all this stuff. But then he has one where he's like, all the girls, you will be learning what, like, treating war wounds and, like, cooking and how to get pregnant.
Yep. Yep.
And Rebel Wilson, I love her character. She's insane.
Yes.
But she's like, yeah, I've had 8 children.
18 children for Germany.
I've had 18 children for Germany.
Yeah.
I also just really love, like, seeing the Hitler Youth, and, like, with Jojo at the beginning, we see his, like, absolute fanaticism. Like,
yeah.
His imaginary friend is Hitler.
Yeah.
And he has his, like, he's always shouting about, like, the power of Germany and the Reich, and, like, his mom has that line where she's like, he cried for 2 days when he found out his grandfather wasn't blonde.
Yeah. I mean, so how much about the Hitler Youth did you know about before this movie?
Not a lot. I don't really know.
When
I knew it existed.
Okay, so when I went and saw it initially, I saw it when I was in law school. It was my final year. I lived on this floor with a friend, and we would just knock on each other's doors and be like, you want to go see a movie? So this was one of those movies where she's like, hey, they're showing Jojo Rabbit at Tower, let's go. And I was like, great. So we went, and then after the movie, she's like, wow, what a crazy fictional film that was. And I was like,
oh, no, babe.
What do you mean? And she's like, Germany didn't have stuff like that. And I was like, do you not know about the Hitler Youth? And she was like, what are you talking about? And we sat in the car after the movie and had a very long discussion about Hitler Youth.
Wow.
Because she had never heard of it. And, like, she went to good schools and had never heard of it.
It's one of those things where, like, history curriculum is just so fucked from state to state. But yeah, like, even if you go to a good school, you're not going to be learning the same history.
There's also so much. I mean, part of it is I was raised by a history buff. And the other part of it is in middle school, we had a teacher who had a PhD she was getting her master's or PhD in the Holocaust, in the history of the Holocaust. And she gave a presentation that I thought was fascinating, and I would go to her office during, like, lunch hours and try to learn more about it.
Wow.
But it's also that thing of, like, you gotta know when to back up, and I, for a long time, didn't know that, and I still sometimes don't listen. So, like, I know a good amount about this.
Okay. Well, tell me a little bit in how it relates to the film.
Well, so it's all pretty much everything you see is real.
Okay.
The only thing that's, like, is people debate about it, but, like, the only thing that's not real is, like, they never say what town he's in, and there was never really a town where the U.S. and Russia were attacking at the same time. That didn't really happen.
Okay.
So some people are like, it's not historically accurate. And you're like, yeah, in that one sense that battle didn't happen, but, like, that's what people's daily lives looked like. Germany had a lot of color in it because they thought they were on the precipice of something fantastic, right? So, like, of course there's color and great, wonderful things, and people don't live in black and white.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's something I appreciated, and that's why I asked if Taika directed it, is this movie has, like, a very whimsical, very colorful atmosphere, and it almost, in some parts, it reminded me a lot of, like, Wes Anderson. Because it feels like everything that's on frame feels artistic in like kind of a painterly way. Like
Yeah.
always focusing on like the shoes and like the way that things are placed and like his artwork for his book that he's writing. Like, which I think is so funny. He's writing his little expose on the Jews, and it's called Yoo-Hoo Jews, and it's so
good.
Everyone laughs at it. Like, the Gestapo guys are like, that has made my day.
The world's supposed to feel kind of whimsical at the beginning because in Jojo's eyes, the world's very bright.
Yeah.
Because he is blindly believing in this idea, and then the movie gets color-wise darker.
Oh yeah,
towards the end of the movie, and it gets more like serious and real as he questions things, and it's supposed to parallel the crumbling down of his internal biases, which is, you can see it.
The scene where he's just sitting in front of his mom's corpse hanging, like all of a sudden it's way more desaturated, and like even the music is less fun and bouncy, and like just kind of going in with the music, and it's all like super fun. I like that the soundtrack is like pop songs but in German.
Yeah.
And so they have that whole beginning montage that's like the Beatles song, and it's absolutely like Beatlemania, but it's Hitler and stuff, where you see like the women like fainting in the crowd, and they're all like doing the Heil.
Yeah. It's also like that's what it was though for those kids.
Yeah.
Like Hitler was that.
Yeah. I mean, he has pictures of him on his mirror that are like kind of how other like some kids do, like Power Rangers or like superheroes or rock stars. He has like his little pictures of Hitler on his mirror, and then like the posters and stuff on his walls.
It's crazy how much of a chokehold Hitler had on the youth.
Yeah.
Especially like the young guys.
Well, and I feel like it's one of my favorite things through the whole thing is his friend Yorkie.
Oh, I'm obsessed with Yorkie.
I'm obsessed with Yorkie. He's just like the sweetest little fat kid with glasses.
Such a scene stealer.
Becomes a fucking child soldier.
Yeah.
He's like, yeah, I'm a soldier now. And then he's like, his uniform, he's like
falling apart. It's paper-like.
Yeah, it's paper-like. They said it's not paper, it's paper-like.
Yeah. Well,
he has some of the best. He's fucking 11 years old, and he's just like shooting a grenade launcher at the end of the battle. He's like missing the whole back of his uniform and is like covered in soot.
Yeah.
But he's so positive the whole time too. He's all like, "Oh, hey, Jojo."
Yeah. I love how sweet he is. And that was something that like Taika talked about when writing these characters, is that he didn't want to depict anybody as like monstrous. He wanted to depict like, this is a child's lens.
Yeah.
And this is a kid seeing his friend, and this is how kids talk to each other. Or like, even Rebel Wilson's character, she's like so fully into the whole Nazism, but like Jojo trusts her, so she comes off as friendly.
Yeah.
He does have a support system. They are all Nazis, but he has a support system.
Yorkie has some of the best quotes. Like, my favorite, they're talking, and Jojo's upset after the rabbit thing. And Jojo's talking about how Hitler is his best friend. And Yorkie's like, I thought I was your best friend. He's like, well, unless you're Hitler in a child's body, then you're number two. And Yorkie just goes, oh, I guess I'm just a kid in a fat kid's body. He's just so sweet, and like his little round glasses.
He comes off so wonderfully. They said like when they were auditioning Yorkie, that kid was like an immediate standout.
Oh, yeah.
And they like did other rounds of auditioning, but they're like, yeah, he's gonna be it.
Well, and I just like, this movie is great because it has so many characters, and they do feel like whimsical and fun because you have that like Jojo is your perspective on everyone. The standout character has to be his mom, though. Like, she is...
Yes.
It's Scarlett Johansson as Rosie.
Yeah.
And she is a fascinating character to me.
Yeah.
Because she is kind of she swings back and forth kind of wildly, but she feels so out of place. Like, she exists in Jojo's world, but like the way she behaves is like just to the left of where he's at.
Yeah.
She is so bold, and she just speaks her mind, and she's so like bullheaded.
Yeah. I mean, this is one of the things that I think might help inform her, like with the historical context, is Hitler Youth kids were told to rat on their parents. Mm-hmm. Like, that was a pretty regular thing of, like, if your parents don't wholeheartedly believe in the cause, let us know.
Yeah.
Or if, like, your parents don't like you being here, let us know. And, like, parents, disappeared that way.
Yeah.
And the Hitler Youth, towards the end of the war, which is when this takes place, was doing their best to get kids away from their parents and in these summer camps to, like, learn war more quickly. And one of the things also is, like, kids entered the Hitler Youth when they were 10. They graduated when they were 15. So if you were a boy, you were then conscripted at that point, if you were able to fight. So when the war ended, they, like, didn't know what to do with the Hitler Youth, because they're like, these are 15, 16, like, they're all young kids who were involved in war crimes in a way, but they were so brainwashed they didn't really know what to do.
Yeah.
The Allies just disbanded the Hitler Youth, and the guy who was in charge of it at the time, he was charged for different war crimes, but he was never charged with this. And then later, when Berlin put him on trial, I can't remember the guy's name, he was just fined. He was fined like $8,000 in 1930, so I don't know what that would be today. And then he had to surrender half of his property to the state.
Wow.
For his implementation and continuation of the Nazi Youth. But he was never really got more than like a slap. I don't know, that kind of felt like a slap on the wrist for creating.
Yeah. For brainwashing and creating child soldiers.
Yeah. Yeah. It's kind of insane.
She just like,
yeah. But yeah, Rosie, so that's why I think Rosie tries to hold her tongue around Jojo, even though we see the other side of her.
Yeah.
When she's with Elsa. And also the thing with Elsa is, like, I saw this in an interview, and I can't remember who said it, but because it's through the lens of Jojo, he hears stories about his mom through Elsa and has to, like, reconcile who he thinks she is.
Yeah.
Now that he knows this about her.
Yeah.
And, like, him having to learn there was two sides of his mom is something. And, like,
yeah.
It's explored more in the book because
I didn't know there was a book.
Yes, so this is based off of the book Caging Skies.
Okay.
And I read that book. I think it's very nice that Taika said this was inspired by the book. Mm-hmm. Because they're so incredibly different. Like, the only thing that's kind of similar are, like, the names. Because, like, in Caging Skies, it starts out when Jojo's younger, and he sees a rally, and his dad is really dismissive of the Hitler rally that they see. Mm-hmm. And then his dad disappears, and then he was living with his grandma dies, and then because they live in a huge house in Berlin in the book. This, like, old manor. His grandpa had done something and had a bunch of money, but now all they have is the house because of the previous war. Mm. They're very, very broke. The dad works across the river. It's, like, vague because he's a kid, so he doesn't really get it. He's like, the dad works at a factory somewhere, and one night he just doesn't come back. And then same thing with his mom. One night she just doesn't come back, and then he's stuck. Oh yeah, and then his grandma dies, and then he has the person in the walls, and it's him. He's like 11 or something in the books. He's like 11 to 14 towards the end of the war, trying to figure out how to keep this house and, like, get rations. So, like, there's a throw-out bit in the movie where you see Jojo, like, collecting sticks. Mm-hmm. But that's a huge chunk of the book where he's forced to go into the forest to find food because they are starving.
Oh, Jesus.
Because there's just nothing. He's like, the rations aren't around, and, like, there's just no food, and there was no fuel. And so he'd be, like, trying to go to the forest, but he's, like, a 13-year-old kid at this point. All the other people who know how to do this have already gotten everything out of the woods, and he's just trying his best. But the book is more of a psychological thriller. It is I think, a very disturbing read. I had a hard time reading it towards the end because he doesn't tell Elsa the war is over.
Oh.
And he keeps her, because that point in the book is halfway when the war ends.
Jesus.
And he's like, I'm just not going to tell her because then she'll leave me too, like everyone else. And then he just keeps her prisoner for the next 30 years.
Jesus.
Until she figures it out and runs away when they're like 60 or something. And it's insane. And the book is him justifying keeping her prisoner for a majority of it. Of him being like, well, I love her so much I have to protect her. I love her so much she has to stay in the walls. Like, she's mine. Oh, this Jew is poisoning my mind, so I have to keep her here. Like, it is the most, it's like, it was one of those things where I'm like, reading this is reading the inside of a predator's mind. Like, it was hard to read at points because it was so gross, for lack of a better word. It was just very, like, she was there obviously because she had no other choice, and he's like, I don't know. It is an insane book. I really felt away after reading it, and I wanted to talk to somebody about it afterwards, and I was like, I don't want to make anybody read it, but I want to talk to someone about it, because this is mental.
Yeah.
Because I was like, is this supposed to be about the cycle of abuse? Like, he went through this abusive thing, and so now he's going through, like, I could not, it wrecked me for, like, 2 weeks. I just kept thinking about it and how, like, fucked up it was. It was an insane read. I don't know if I'd recommend it.
Well, thank you, Taika, for not doing that
Well,
to us
so
with this movie.
Taika found it out because his mom told him about it. So his mom had started reading the book. She was at the beginning chunk, before where the kid might be able to be redeemed, and then by the end of the book, there's no way Jojo can be redeemed.
Yeah.
So she's like partway through, she's like, oh, this is such a great book, Taika, you should read it. It's about this kid in the Hitler Youth, and he finds out his mom's keeping a girl on the walls. And Taika's like, that's a great idea. And he came up with the, like, story then, essentially, and then he later read the book and was like, oh, not that. Yeah. But he still went and asked permission, because he's like, I got the idea from your book, so it is based off of this book, and so there is, I think it's nice that he did that, because he honestly,
very much inspired by, not based on.
Yeah, I don't know why they say based on. It really should be inspired by, because, like, a lot of the mom character did not feel this way at all.
Yeah.
Versus, like, Jojo, Taika talks about how he wrote this, he had initially was writing it when he was, like, first having kids, when he first had his kid. Like, he wrote this before filming What We Do in the Shadows, the movie.
Okay.
So he wrote it, kind of had this idea, and he was just becoming a parent, realized how much his mom had done for him, and in a way was writing Rosie as this love letter to single parents, and, like, how hard it is to balance.
Yeah.
And he's like, and what it would be at that time, balancing, you know, the harshness of the world and the reality of their situation. Like, you see it at the dinner table scene where they just straight up don't have food, but her trying to keep him in good spirits and in that world of wonder, while also not outing herself as being a liberal.
She has to be so careful around him, but she also, like, you can see her, she snaps at him a few times where she's like, I don't understand you with this Hitler stuff. Like,
yeah,
you need to, she calls
him Shitler
case.
at one point, and I love that.
But she, like, as a character, she is a really great mom, because you can see how hard she's trying, and, like, she knows that she is kind of pushing it too far sometimes, but, like, she knows when it's safe. Because, like, her interactions with Captain K are really interesting, where, like, she feels comfortable just going in and straight up yelling at him and being like, you're why my kid got blown up. Give him a job.
Yeah. Well, I feel like she and Captain K had, like, such an understanding about each other.
Because he's, like, gay.
He's gay and she sees it. She's anti-Nazi and he sees it. But they're just going to stay quiet and survive this thing. Yeah. Which, it's a really interesting thing where they both are like, there's a kid involved, so we're going to shut the fuck up and get this kid through it, and we're going to get through it, and it's going to be fine. Yeah. Like, they took different routes to the getting through it aspect.
Yeah. Well, and it was interesting to watch it this time around, because I totally didn't pick up on him being gay the first time. I was, like, it was just on and I watched it. Like, I didn't, like, go in wanting to see it, if that makes sense, the first time.
Sure. Were you, like, on your phone half the time?
I don't know.
Okay.
It was 2019. I was living in, my life had blown up.
Okay.
we'll leave it there.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I guess it was just more obvious this time around. And so it was really neat for me to kind of see that and go like, oh.
Yeah. So Captain K in the original script didn't really have that big of a part. Mm-hmm. But then when Taika found out that Sam Rockwell was playing him, he rewrote the character.
Of course.
And he's like, and the character kind of kept getting bigger and bigger. And Taika said it hit a point when he was writing the script where he's like, this guy's just gay. This guy is just, he's gay. And he said it ended up being really fun to kind of write that and explore that. And Sam talked about how fun it was to kind of like play with this kind of oxymoron-ish character of, well, he's like really disillusioned. Mm-hmm. He talks about how like he knows he's gonna die, so he's just gonna go out in style on the way he wants to go.
Yeah, his fucking battle cape with the sparkles and the like
so good.
Feathers and
the bedazzled helmet. I
so
loved
good.
it. And he also talked, I thought this was interesting about Sam, he talked about having to speak in the German accent.
Yeah.
And he said the way he did it was he just learned how to do a German accent with the character not in mind, so that way they wouldn't be married to each other. So he learned how to do a German accent, and then later just kind of made the character, and the character ended up having a German accent. He didn't want to, like, learn those things together.
Yeah.
Which I thought was interesting. And then all of his vocal warm-ups were a little bit gay to, like, get in character. Like, one of them was, like, tickling your feather with an ass, but like in a German accent. It's very funny.
I really want to know everything about his process, because like everything Sam Rockwell's in, he's just so fantastic.
He's so fantastic and so intentional. And like that was something, there was a scene I noticed this time watching, which I hadn't noticed before, and I think it's something that you'd pick up on subsequent watches, but during the book bonfire scene, and you can see Jojo has the moment of hesitation where he's like, should I like this? Should I not like this? And Captain K is looking at him at that moment, being like, I think he's going to get it. And he like kind of smirks. And then Jojo sees everyone celebrating and he starts celebrating. And then Captain K drinks again and looks away.
Yeah.
And I was like, Gah! He sees it. He knows it. And like, he pretends to not be watching, but he is.
Yeah. Well, and he, like, the ways that he helps Jojo are so, like, subtle, but so, like, huge at the same time. Like, where he,
the Gestapo
oh
visit.
my god, yeah, the Gestapo.
Oh my god, that
I
raid.
fucking lost my shit. Where was it? I wrote it down because I thought it was so funny. The Gestapo is in, and, like, they're talking, and he, like, shows up late, and he's like, oh, what did I miss? And they're all, oh, we were all Heil Hitlering each other, and then you came, and we were Heil Hitlering you, and now that's where we are.
That scene, they say Heil Hitler 31
times.
It's
just Heil Hitler, Heil Hitler, Heil Hitler, Heil
It
Hitler.
holds the record for the most said, which is, like, so funny. And Taika said he was inspired by writing that scene. He's like, how would Monty Python write this scene?
Oh.
And he's like, kind of like this.
I can see that. It's very Monty Python.
And he wanted to also take, like, these regulations and really show the absurdity, because you're supposed to Heil Hitler everyone, like a Nazi person would Heil Hitler everyone who came into a room, you know, instead of saying hi Hitler every time. And so he's like, what is the comic extent of this? And just, like, ran with it.
How many non-speaking Gestapo members can I put in so that we can have it? That's 30 times. That's hilarious.
31 times.
31 times.
Yeah.
But yeah, he shows up while the Gestapo is there, and, like, because Elsa is trying to save Jojo because his knife is missing, because she had taken his knife. And she comes out and is pretending to be his sister, because they established that she had known his sister.
Yeah, so in the book, it's more explicit, and in this, it's, if you know it, it's kind of, I don't know. But she was schoolmates with his sister, but his sister had died of TB before I think he remembers her dying in the book, but he's, like, really young at the time. He's under 10 when she dies.
Yeah.
And the mom ends up taking in Elsa kind of as a pseudo-daughter, because they were best friends. And so when the Gestapo would come for her parents, his mom takes her in the books. But that's not how it's done in the movie, because she talks about getting moved from person to person before ending up here.
Yeah.
And I also can't remember. I think I read the book, like, years ago at this point, but yeah, it's kind of like they're supposed to be, like, school friends.
Yeah, because she is, like, trying to save him by coming out and pretending to be his dead sister. They're all tense, so then she has to go up and, like, give them her papers, and Captain K is the one who steps in and, like, takes the papers and can see that it's not her, and he asks her, like, well, what's your birthday? And she gets the date wrong, but he doesn't. He's like, oh yeah, good, just get a new picture, you look really young in this one.
Yeah.
And it's such a tense moment because, like, you don't really know how much you can trust him at that point. It's so tense, and you're like, whoa, and then you kind of see the, like, come down from the adrenaline because Elsa is, like, crying inside the walls again, and she's like, her birthday is the 7th, not the 1st.
Yeah.
He knows they're gonna come back. And, like,
and
Jojo...
don't.
Well, and Jojo has the moment, too, where he's like, he was helping us.
Yeah.
And that you see that's kind of where it starts clicking again, where he's like, well, why did this guy who was teaching us how to be Nazis, why was he helping me with this Jewish girl that I'm hiding in my walls?
Yeah.
And you can kind of see, like, because the interactions with his mom, like, he's there for that, but he doesn't really think that much of it. And then with that moment with the papers, he's like, oh.
He's like, oh, maybe I can deeply trust this guy. Like, truly trust this guy.
Yeah.
Yeah,
but it's, like, confusing at the same time, because he's like, why is this German soldier guy?
So I was reading, like, first-hand accounts of Hitler Youth. People, now that they're, I mean, most of them have passed now, but, like, in their 90s and 80s, there was a movement. It's part of the, like, Remembering the Holocaust movement, where they're interviewing people who survived the Holocaust or were Hitler Youth members, so that way people can remember. And one of the Hitler Youth peoples, who, you know, was older, she talked about how she started questioning the belief of it all when she was, like, 16. She was like, I don't think this Hitler thing is what it's cracked up to be. But she talked about how isolating it was because there was literally no one she could talk to.
Yeah.
She's like, I couldn't ask anyone for assistance in figuring it out. And I was like, that is you kind of see that depicted in Jojo, where he's starting to question, but he can't talk to a single person about it.
Yeah.
Because it's too risky. And so you have to figure it out yourself.
He doesn't have anyone. Like, when his mom just doesn't come back home, it's just him and Elsa in that house. There's no adults check up on them. Mm-mm. They don't have, like, any money. He doesn't really go to his job that often, and he doesn't get paid for his little robot job.
Yeah. It's mandatory at that point.
Yeah, and so he really, like, the isolation is so palpable, and so he has nobody to talk to.
I will say, like, the movie did a good job of making that house feel really big and him feeling small, and it's, like, really daunting in that respect.
Well, and he's so little.
He's such a little guy.
He's a little guy.
He was 10 when they were filming.
Aww.
Yeah, and this was part of the reason why Taika wanted to make it modernized with, like, the modern language and the modern music and stuff, is he's like, if Roman, the actor, if he can be in it and be 10 and get what's going on, other 10-year-olds should be able to get this. And so we want to make it approachable for a younger audience to see and understand how hate and bias can be implemented at a young age. Yeah. So that's why it's more contemporary language-wise. Okay. And that's why some people don't like it, but they're like, it's too modern. And they're like, okay, but it's still telling a story that we haven't seen on screen before. Yeah.
I like the idea of it being something that 10-year-olds can understand, because that kind of makes some of the very silly stuff. I mean, I like how silly it is, but it makes the silly stuff kind of fit better into, like, the flow. I mean, like, the bit where Jojo is, like, eating his cabbage stick soup while across the table imaginary Hitler is eating, like, the giant roasted unicorn head, and he's like, this is delicious.
It's so... Yeah, that bit is funny. And also it starts to show, like, the frustration he has.
Yeah, because his imaginary friend, his idol, Hitler, is, like...
living it up.
Yeah, he's living it up. He's also just being rude, and, like, they start fighting with each other and stuff. One of the things I do remember from when the movie came out was there was all kinds of think pieces and all kinds of whatever around Taika choosing to play Hitler and play him the way that he did.
He didn't really get he was told he had to play it.
Okay.
It's like, if this movie's getting made, you're playing Hitler.
Okay.
So Fox was like, we'll pick up this movie and we'll make it if you play Hitler.
Interesting.
And he was like, okay.
Why for?
So the reasoning, and if you like look it up, he gives many reasons, but I think the most genuine answer I saw him give is that the way he wrote the script, Hitler is written so strongly in his voice that they wanted him to do it, because they're like, we don't know if anyone else is going to be able to see that vision and execute it the way that you're able to do it.
That makes sense.
And they also talked about, like, they didn't want a big name actor because it'd be distracting. And they also really wanted someone who understood the tone of the movie, because the tone switches so drastically.
Yeah.
And so they're like, we need someone who deeply gets it to
Okay.
bring this character to life. And so that's why they're like, think of like, he has a vision. We trust that he's the only one that can execute it.
Yeah.
Is kind of what it came down to. And so
Okay.
he agreed to do it. And I think it works really well because he knows the tone.
Yeah.
Like, I think that'd be really hard for any other actor to kind of come in and try and master that.
Yeah.
Because that is such a mind's eye kind of playing, and Hitler is such a sensitive character to play.
Yeah.
That I think it worked out well.
Because Hitler is a very sensitive character to play. I feel like Taika is one of the few people that could play Hitler comedically and have it land. I don't want to say sensitive, but like for people like Hitler, where it is like, I mean, for lack of a better word, he is an evil piece of shit.
Yeah. Yeah.
It is really hard to play him in a way that feels like you don't want to touch it. You don't, like,
Yeah.
it seems too much and so a lot of the time, like, in Inglourious Bastards, it's kind of a comedy, but it's still, like, it's more of a, like, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, where he's still, like, kind of serious as Hitler,
Yeah.
but they're, like, kind of like, oh, ha, ha, Hitler, guys! Whoa, what a guy! And in this one, Hitler is, like, dancing in the woods with Jojo
Yeah.
and, like, running and screaming while he takes the, like, grenade.
Well, I think, like, part of it that gets missed, too, oftentimes when people are like, I can't believe they showed Hitler in this way, it's like, because it's not Hitler.
Yeah, it's his imaginary friend.
And, like, that's
He
something
is
that...
a 10-year-old's idea of Hitler.
Yeah, and one of the things that Taika did in this is, like, Hitler was a vegetarian. We see Jojo's version of Hitler eating meat. Mm-hmm. Hitler didn't smoke. We see him handing out cigarettes.
Constantly trying to give this 10-year-old a cigarette.
Yeah, because, like, Jojo didn't know. And part of that is the dissemination of information. Part of that is just, like, he's a 10-year-old kid.
Yeah.
And it's supposed to be this poignant thing of, like, this kid did not know who Hitler was or what he was up to.
Yeah.
He was just told to think he was cool.
Yeah.
And he thought he was cool.
He saw the propaganda and rolled with it.
Yeah, he's like, this is the way to go.
Well, and you see that too with his idea of, like, he's doing his expose on Jews, and he's like, well, where is your tail? Did you really grow up in caves? Where are your horns? Can you control my mind?
Yeah.
Like, the Gestapo, they're going through his little book, and they're, like, showing all the things. They're like, oh, it's all true, of course.
Yes.
They're pointing at, like, oh, look, he has a tail, and he's eating children and hatching out of eggs.
Okay, and it was kind of like a tense scene, but the scene where Elsa, like, beats up Jojo.
Yeah.
So good.
Well, she has that quote, I didn't write it down, but she's talking about,
Such a
she's
good
like,
line.
I come from people who...
wrestled giants and come from angels or something like that.
Yeah, like, came from angels and killed giants, and, like, it's just... And her picture of, like, what Jewish people, like, looked like was, like, beautiful.
It's so cool.
Ugh.
And her thing where he's like, where do Jewish people live? And she's like, in your mind.
Yeah.
It's like, so good.
She's great.
Her movie touchstone was Mean Girls.
I see it.
Because she was supposed to... Taika was like, I didn't want to write a victim character. We don't need to see another poor Jew, you know? Like, yeah, she's living a life where she has to be hidden, but it doesn't necessarily mean she's a victim. He's like, I want to make her mean. I want to make her strong.
Yeah.
And she was like, she was the mean girl in school who was like popular, pretty, people liked her. She had boyfriends.
Mm-hmm.
Like, she was in high school, living that best popular high school life, and then all that gets yanked away. Now she has to live in a wall where a 10-year-old bugs her every other day. And he's like, so I thought it'd be like, he's like, he wanted to make her more feel like a mean teenager and less like a weak victim that we see in every other flippin' World War II movie.
Yeah, well, and I like it too because at the end they have that thing where he talks about how he's in love with her, but she loves him like a little brother.
Yeah.
And you feel that. Like, she very much has the attitude of, like, he is the annoying younger brother.
Yeah.
I love, like, the weird little bits of whimsy. Like, there are moments that feel out of place, but in a way that makes sense. Like, when, Jojo gets the butterflies in his tummy.
Yeah.
And you see just all of a sudden the, like, shot of, like, butterflies over his tummy. And when his mom dies, the houses that look like eyes.
Yeah.
And they just kind of feel, like, jarring, but in a way that's, like, good for, it's like, it doesn't take you out of it. It's like, oh, here's something to pay attention to. This is different. This is something that's really happening to this kid.
It also just, like, made the scene feel more enormous.
Yeah.
Like, everyone is watching.
Yeah.
Everyone is watching and everyone knows. Which is wild.
The scene where he finds his mom is so fucking heartbreaking.
It's so sad.
Because I want to know if they talk about it in any interviews or anything, but, like, they make such a point of, like, focusing around shoes and feet. And so, like, that's one of Jojo's big things is he doesn't know how to tie his own shoes. So his mom is always doing it. And then a lot of the time you focus on, like, his mom's very special shoes and, like, they stand out. She has these fancy, fun shoes. There's the bit where they're walking and she's walking on the ledge above him. So you see him and then just her feet behind him. And so then when he finds her, you see her shoes.
It's all very intentional.
Dangling.
Yeah. Those were a really popular shoe in, right before Nazi Germany.
Yeah.
Those shoes were really popular in the war in between. Mm-hmm. So they are a popular colorful shoe, which I think is kind of fun, that little historical nugget. But yeah, no, it's very, very intentional that all those shots were focused. Yeah.
I just wonder if there's, like, significance behind it. Because I recognize that it is intentional, but, like, I want to know the and this is just me kind of extrapolating, but, like, the thing with the shoes kind of reminded me of, I think it's in the Auschwitz Museum, there's, like, a bit where it's all of the shoes left behind from the people that were in the camps and, like, sent to the chambers. And so I wonder if that's kind of part of it, is, like, that's what she gets boiled down to, is her shoes.
I didn't hear anybody talk about it in interviews. I saw one person write a thing about how he thought shoes for that character were important because she is the grounding character quite regularly. And we even see her ground Jojo literally when she calls him Shitler and ties his shoes together. Mm-hmm. Like, she's constantly grounding him. So I kind of liked that take on a theme, but again, that was, like, somebody else. I haven't heard Taika talk about it or any of the other actors talk about it, so I don't...
Well, then that's what I'll say. My opinion is, I think it's that. I also think it comes with his, like...
well, they are, like... I did hear him talk about, like, selecting that shoe in particular because it was a very trendy...
Well, she's very fashionable.
She's very fashionable. Yeah, so it's kind of like her freedom of expression. Yeah. Is that.
Well, and just the tying of the shoes is really... I really like it as a through line for Jojo because it's, like, a baby thing. Yeah. Like, she's...
It is a reminder that he's a kid.
Yeah, he's a baby. He doesn't know how to tie his shoes. Yeah. And, like, I got so emotional when he finds his mom and her shoes are untied and he can't tie her shoes.
It's so sad.
But then at the end he can finally tie his shoes and it's like it's this kind of mixed up moment though, because you're like, oh, he did it, he can tie his shoes now, he's an adult. But then you think about, like, the things that had to happen for him to, like, he's an adult because his mom died and he survived this fucking battle and he's at the end of the war and he's, like in charge of himself.
Also, he tied the shoes on Elsa while she was wearing his mother's clothes. Mm-hmm. Which I thought was like kind of like it hit away. It hit away for me where it's like, this is the new relationship. This is the new kind of older woman he has in his life.
Yeah.
Who's going to help him. And she is also a child.
Yeah.
And it's sad.
Yeah.
There's no way around it.
You see it too in the like dancing scene at the end where they're kind of stuck, where it's this moment where she's doing like kind of similar dance moves to what his mom would do, but neither of them really know the steps. Yeah, and neither of them really know how to dance. And so I think it ties into like they're both adults, but they don't know how to do it right. And they're like kind of out of step and still childish, because like they start doing the like silly kid dancing. Yeah. And it's like, oh shit, these kids, these little babies, where are they going now?
Well, this is the crazy bit that I didn't realize until I read Caging Skies. Mm-hmm. I didn't know this. Sorry. And I thought this was fascinating, so I'm going to tell you. Okay. But essentially, the Allies come in to Berlin, and then they split it up into 4 different districts. So it becomes, there's the U.S. quarter, the French quarter, the UK quarter, and then the Soviet Union, right before it became Soviet Union, the Russian quarter. And then in the Russian area, they're already discussing the Red Scare. And so in the book, or like the coming of the Soviet Union, so in the book, there's all these background characters that are talking about how Russia is coming to take over with the Soviet Union, or the Soviet Union is coming. And like that threat was like, the war ended and that immediately started. So these kids are now going to come to age during East-West Berlin era Cold War stuff.
Well, and it's so funny to see the way the propaganda shifts immediately, too, where, like, when the Russians and the Americans are coming, Jojo is talking to Yorkie, and he's like, yeah, my girlfriend, whatever, and he's like, but she's Jewish. And Yorkie straight up is like, oh, well, we're not really worried about them anymore. We're worried about the Russians. Yeah. And he has this thing where he's like, I heard that they... I can't remember what he says, but the part I wrote down is he's like, we have to stop them before they eat all of us and screw our dogs. Yeah. And it's so funny how like drastically it shifts. We're like, oh, well, we're not worried about the Jews anymore. It's the Russians that are monsters and eat children and like whatever.
Yeah. Like that quick turn that happens. Yeah. I think some of the lines that Yorkie says about Jewish people and Russians, and I know most of the lines that Rebel says about Jewish people, are taken straight out of textbooks from that time.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah. Which is... Yeah. Yeah. Right? Where, like, Rebel said, like, that whole bit... She's like, there was some riffing, but everything that was in the script was from...
Oh, yeah.
From a textbook that were given to children.
One of the things that Elsa says is she's like... Something about, we're all goblins who control all the money. And I went, oh, some people, cough, cough, J.K. Rowling, cough, cough, still think that way.
Yeah. So another thing about Elsa and her entrance, because it's told through the lens of Jojo, it's supposed to mimic a horror movie.
No, yeah, I loved that. So with the fingers curling around the door.
Yes. And like her walking her fingers down the banister before you can see her body. But it's specifically, I guess, a reference to the Swedish version of Let the Right One In.
Okay, yeah, I caught that. I was wondering.
Taika and Jermaine Clement were obsessed with the movie Let the Right One In.
Rightly so. It's a fucking banger.
Just, like, informs so much more of their work for me sometimes. Yeah. I did really appreciate... towards the end of the movie, how whenever Hitler shows up in the imagination, he is dressed down more and more and more until he has the self-inflicted wound.
Yeah. I know, that was the thing I loved. You can see that, like, news does not travel fast. It's all propaganda, and it's very, like, what they know is very controlled. Like, and also Jojo's 10, he's not reading newspapers. So he finds out that Hitler's dead from Yorkie, and his whole world is, like, shattered, because he's like... There's no way he killed himself. There's no way.
This is another thing that, in, like, those things from Hitler Youth people talking about, they were like, they truly thought as children that if Hitler died, the world would end. Yeah. And so, like, you see Jojo have that moment of, like, but how could that be the case? Like, the war's still happening. We're still here. Everything's the same.
Well, and how could my hero kill himself?
And
Yorkie just so, like, casually, like, yeah, I guess there was a lot of stuff he just wasn't telling us. It's like, man. Yeah.
Yeah. I love Yorkie at the end where he's like, I just need to go get a cuddle.
What does he say? He just says, seems like I can never die.
Yeah.
Such a good movie.
It's such a good movie through and through, and I feel like when people come at it where they're like, well, it feels rude, it feels insensitive, part of me's like, you don't understand satire, my dude.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's one of those things where I'm like, let it be, because I've heard also a lot of Holocaust survivors talk about how they've really appreciated this movie because of, like, showing the more everyday realness of what was kind of happening and showing the humanism and what was going on. And even, like, Taika said he showed the movie once, and this woman came up to him afterwards and was like, my parents, who were Holocaust survivors, would have fucking loved this movie. She was like, it made fun of Hitler in such a perfect way, and it humanized Jews in such a beautiful way.
Yeah, well, and I feel like you get these movies that try to show the, like, well, people just went about their lives, but it's always focusing on, like, the German, like, the rich German families.
When I studied abroad, one of my good friends, she was German, and I was like, what was education like, blah, blah, and she's like, every year they have a thing on, like, do not do this again.
Don't be a Nazi.
Don't be a Nazi.
Don't do it.
They have a don't be a Nazi unit every year. And she was, like, so sick of it, but one of the things I was asking her was like, well, how aware was everyone about the situation at the time? And she was like, people knew what was up, but they knew if you questioned, you get killed. So she said, like, her family, they had a ranch out in the boonies, or like a barn, out in the boonies, and people would regularly run through the property.
Mm-hmm.
And so she said her grandparents just would leave the barn door open with water and food scraps. So that way, if Gestapo or somebody came by, they'd be like, oh, we forgot to close it, or, like, that food and water's for, like, the pigs. Like, they had reasons to have it kind of open that they could lie about, but it was, like, very much for the people that they saw running through their field. So, like, we didn't know what they were running from, and we weren't about to ask. But, like, this was the least we could do in this situation.
Yeah. Oh, a scene we absolutely have to talk about is when Captain K saves Jojo's life, basically.
Yeah.
Because Jojo, Rebel Wilson, like, puts him in the German uniform coat, the Nazi coat, because she's like, they need to know not to shoot you. Mm-hmm. So she puts the thing on him, and, like, he has to hide. And then because he's wearing the Nazi uniform, the soldier, like, takes him and is putting him in with the other soldiers. Yeah. And Captain K, like, sees him.
Has the sweetest moment
He has
with
the sweetest, like, he really connects with him, and he's like, you're a very good kid. And your mom was great, and, like, you need to take care of your sister. Yeah. And, like, you need to just keep going from this. And so he rips off the uniform jacket and, like, spits on him and starts, like, calling him a Jew. And, like, saying, I don't know this fucking kid, blah, blah. And so the soldiers, like, rip him away. And then as Jojo is being kicked out of that area, like, they take Captain K away, and you just hear the gunfire.
Yeah.
And it sucks. Because it's that thing where you're like, he is a Nazi. And he did do Nazi shit.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, but then, like, because you have this moment of, like, connection, you're like, ah, fuck.
Well, that's the thing. That's the humanizing thing of it, right? Like, that...
People are three-dimensional, and sometimes people do horrible fucking shit for their government because that's the option they have.
This was something that I was reading in a book about the Hitler Youth, where there was this movement that some parents did to try and boycott their kids being mandatorily put into the Hitler Youth, where they were just like, well, we can't afford the outfits. We can't afford to do this.
I love that.
And that was, like, their excuse, and the state provided them with stuff.
Oh, fuck.
And they were like, damn it. Also, part of the Hitler Youth thing is towards the end of the war, they started just giving them high school credits.
Jeez.
So that way, like, they could be training for war more and being in school less.
Okay.
Oh, something else I want to say about this is I think Scarlett Johansson is such an amazing actress, and people don't put her in good roles because she's pretty.
I can see that.
Often they're like, you're sexy, go be sexy. And it's like, she can play incredible characters.
Yeah.
She's such a good actress, but oftentimes they're like, here's a skin-tight super suit. Go punch a guy.
Yeah.
And it drives me nuts. If she was a man, she would have had much more serious roles, and people would take her much more seriously in Hollywood than I think they often do.
Yeah. You get it's like, well, she's kind of deadpan, so she's not a good actress. She's just pretty, so we're gonna have her do things where she's pretty. And it's like, psych, she actually is very intentional with her choices, and she's a great actress. The scene where they have the fight at the dinner table, and Jojo says that he wishes his dad was there, and she puts the, like, jacket on and the soot on her face and is, like, having the conversation between the dad and the mom. That's a great scene. Like, she's so talented.
Taika wrote that scene for her.
Yeah.
To show that off.
Yeah. And there's, like, she's one of those actors that, like, people kind of like to find things to let them hate her.
Yeah. Another thing I saw about this movie when I was reading people's, like, reviews and thoughts on it was a lot of people were like, this movie is important because it makes us talk, and you can tell who has seen the movie and who hasn't, because a lot of people shut down this film before they even watch it. Mm-hmm. But there's a whole, after the movie came out, I believe it was the Holocaust Education Center, they made a curriculum based around this movie.
Oh, wow.
For high school kids.
That's neat.
It's fun.
I like that.
It's cool, and I think this is such an approachable movie for children. You know, like, if you showed me this in high school, I would have been interested.
Yeah.
Versus all the other super sad, flippin' Holocaust movies we had to watch in high school.
Yeah, we watched The Pianist.
Yeah, I think that's what we watched, too.
It's a great movie. Not what a high school student would want to watch.
No.
And there's a reason I watched it for film class, and, like, that was why I liked it, is we were watching it for film class, and we weren't using it to learn about the Holocaust. We were learning about methods of filmmaking.
Yeah, that makes sense. One of the other things that Taika talked about this film is how, like, he initially wrote it in, like, 2010, 2011, mm-hmm. and then, you know, came back to it about 5 years-ish later when it was, like, 2016, and he's like, wow, how did this movie become more relevant? Mm. That's concerning. Mm. So he felt like he really needed to, he wanted to make this movie to kind of talk about, to approach or discuss the rising fascism that's happening.
Yeah.
And he also wanted to make this movie to kind of talk about the cycle of hate that we see happen. He's like, kids learn from us. And, like, part of the movie is learning to think for yourself. Mm-hmm. And learning that other people are people. Instead of, he's like, things happen cyclically because we learn from our parents who created the same mistakes. And then our kids learn from us and we're making the same mistakes. And then it creates this cycle of the same mistakes, versus if you pause and step out of it, mm-hmm. you can break it.
Break the cycle.
Break the cycle.
Of everything. Cycle of abuse. Cycle of misinformation. Cycle of, something, a third one.
Love it. But yeah, I also didn't realize that the, like, Nazi youth daggers are a thing.
Really?
I knew they were, like, a thing. I didn't realize they're like a hot commodity.
Weird.
It's weird. And they have an inscription that says blood and honor.
Terrifying.
See,
that's the thing about okay, this is gonna get me canceled. Some of the shit that Nazis have goes so hard. Like, a dagger that says blood and honor, that's fucking sick.
And you had to do
But it's a Nazi thing.
You had to do an act of courage to get the dagger.
That's fucking sick.
And so, like, for a 10-year-old or a 14-year-old, like, that's a big
That's fucking
deal.
Cool.
And then, like, that's the difference between being, like, a boy and a man. And there was, like, this whole thing that they would do to prove your allegiance to the Führer. Everyone would, like, if you were really, truly loyal, mm-hmm. you would walk to Berlin and do the swearing in there.
Jesus.
So some people did that, and they also would pay for these kids to go on vacations to really isolate them, but it was like to show them the motherland and like take them to different areas of Germany to show it off.
Man.
Yeah. Well, something I also kind of wanted to touch on is like Jojo becoming disabled in the movie, and then
because we didn't really touch on that, but he can't move his leg right, and he has the like facial disfigurement.
Yeah.
From getting fucking blown up.
With the grenade. Yeah. And Something that I think is interesting about disabilities is everyone will eventually become disabled if you live long enough. It's like the one thing that you will opt into.
Yeah.
And seeing how that changed Jojo's status, but on the same time, like, kind of saved him from going to war, from being a first-rate citizen to a second-rate citizen, but he's still not as bad as the minority.
Yeah.
You know? And it was interesting to see that very clear hierarchy.
Well, and you see how everyone is just so blasé about, like, calling him a cripple, and even he is like, I'm a cripple, and
well, he has that scene
Elsa's like,
Hitler
no, you're
ugly.
not.
He's like, am I ugly?
And he's like, yes, you're horrible.
Yeah.
But even Elsa is like, you're not a cripple, like...
You're fine.
Yeah, you're a person.
But, like, she changes, she doesn't identify him as his ability or disability.
Yeah.
Which probably speaks to her experience in a big way. Because Taika was directing and playing Hitler, he would often have to direct in the Hitler costume. And he said there'd be moments where he'd be like, that was great, could you do it with this? He's like, Scarlett Johansson is often the person that would kind of give him the look, and he'd be like, oh, right, I'm dressed as Hitler. You don't have to do anything. It's not a command. It's not an order. But he did say, initially, that scene where they're down by the water, Jojo and his mom, Hitler was supposed to kind of just be in the background. So he's dressed, when he's directing that scene, he's dressed as Hitler. And they were trying to get one of the cranes to work. And, like, one of the crane operators, like, there was a miscommunication happening on set. It just wasn't happening. And they were, like, running out of light. And Taika was like, I started getting mad. He's like, I started yelling. And he's like, and then I realized what I was wearing. And he's like, I took it down a notch so fast. Yeah. He's like, I can't get mad in this. Like, it doesn't work. Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah,
I
but
love that
he talked about how, like, being in that outfit was just, like, straight up, because people are always like, oh, how did you feel about it, blah, blah. And he's like, embarrassed. It's embarrassing to be dressed as Hitler and have to talk to people.
Yeah.
And I was like, good read.
That's fair. I love that.
I think I have one more. Oh, I have two research things that I want to talk about. I have a lot of research stuff, but we're just going to do two. They picked Roman as that actor, the kid who plays Jojo, because during the auditions, Jojo, because it's such a demanding role and it needs comedy and seriousness and softness and, like, there's so many elements to it, it was a 30-minute audition.
Jeez.
With Taika playing against, and they said he was, like, the only kid that didn't break eye contact the entire time.
Oh, wow.
And so they picked him. Yeah.
He's really great, too, though, because, like, he kind of has little buck teeth.
Yeah.
He kind of has little bunny teethies.
It works.
Which I love.
Yeah. Well, something that I think Taika talks about a lot in his films is, like, the balancing between humor and seriousness. And I think when people are like, oh, you wrote a comedy, you wrote a dark comedy, he's always like, it doesn't really feel like that. He's like, life isn't a comedy and it isn't a drama. He's like, you're going through life and something really funny will happen and then you turn a corner and you see a dead body. He's like, life is like that.
We talked about that a little bit with our Joe versus the Volcano episode too, because that's something that director talked about, is he's like, life isn't all funny and it isn't all dark. Like, it's a mix.
And that's like what he kind of, I feel like you see that a lot in this, where there are these bright moments with Yorkie and with the adults that are fun, but some of them have really high stake moments with, like, the Gestapo, and, like, you just don't know what.
Well, and even some of
the
funny parts happen at the same time as the really scary fucked up. Like with the Gestapo laughing about the book.
Yeah.
While you're so fucking tense and worried about them discovering the truth.
Yeah. Oh. So scary. But because of, like, the nervousness around, like, the perception of what this movie was going to be, Taika did 15 screen tests.
Jeez.
To get audience reactions. It's a lot. That's a lot of screen tests. Yeah. And also, like, he straight up couldn't, I think I said this earlier, but he couldn't pitch this movie without there being a script. He said he tried to, like, do the treatment and people just weren't picking it up. So he wrote the script and then it got picked up.
Oh, wow.
Because he's like, there's no selling this unless you're like, this is the full vision.
Yeah.
So he had to do it that way.
That's crazy.
Isn't that crazy? So where they ended up filming, because there's a lot of kids, they thought about filming in Germany, but in Germany, kids can only film for, like, 3 hours a day.
Yeah, everywhere except America has, like,
really
child labor laws around filming.
So then they ended up filming in the Czech Republic at this pretty infamous studio for where Nazi propaganda was filmed and released.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess in the Czech Republic, you can film there, and then you just apply whatever country that kid's from, you apply their laws. So because the guy who plays Jojo, the child who plays Jojo, is from the UK, they were able to apply UK children's acting laws, which is like 6 hours a day.
Yeah.
So they were able to get away with 6 hours a day. I think.
Do you want to do like wrap up, final quotes, final ratings?
Yes, let's do wrap up.
So overall I really like it. I'm glad I rewatched it with like my paying attention brain.
It's a good movie.
I don't know why.
It's filmed so well, and it is so approachable.
I don't know what the hell when I watched it the first time. It just didn't hit right. But
had
this time,
so much hype. Yeah, sometimes when things have too much hype, I just go with, like, the first time I watched Lady Bird, I was like, no. But then I rewatched it later, and I was like, oh, this is actually a really good movie.
Mm.
So maybe you had that moment of, like, there's just too much noise around it. It just...
Also, yeah, 2019 was a weird year for Caitlin.
Fair.
But yeah, I really liked watching it again with my thinking brain. And just, there's a lot to look at. I feel like it's deceptively simple. Yeah. If that makes sense, because I feel like when you watch it, you're like, oh yeah, I get it. But then, like, the more you think about it and, like, thinking about it and looking into it and just sort of, like, because I watched it last night. I did a Juliana, and I watched it.
You didn't watch it the day of.
This is true. But, like, watched it last night and then immediately went to bed. And then today, while I was at work, I was thinking about it and kind of going over it and being like, oh, wow, yeah, I actually think I have a lot to say about this one.
So, like, watching this movie straight out, it's a good movie. The more you know about history, the more you get out of it. And if you read Caging Skies, you get even more out of it. Mm-hmm. So I do think it's a really good, like, layered film where you can go in, feel like you saw a great movie about anti-hate, or you can, like, go in and dig in and learn about Nazi youth and history and all that kind of stuff.
That's really... I like that.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks. Do you have any quotes?
Yeah, basically everything Yorkie says.
Literally anything Yorkie says.
No, I just love that we have to stop them before they eat all of us and screw our dogs.
I really liked the line, not everyone is lucky enough to look stupid.
Yeah, his mom is so supportive, but in, like, such a rude way, like, where she ties his shoelaces together and she's like, come on, Hitler Youth, come on, you can do it, step up. I love when he finds Yorkie after the final battle. His fucking suit's all ripped up. He's covered in soot. He's like kind of bleeding. And he's like, Yorkie, I thought you were dead. And he's just like, seems like I just can't die.
Okay, I do love the whole final, like, 3 lines Yorkie has where he's like, it seems like I just can't die. I'm gonna go home and find my mom. I need a good cuddle.
Yeah.
So good. I love it.
And then, of course, my favorite is when he has the final fight with Hitler, his imaginary friend. And he kicks him in the balls and punches him out the window, and he's just like, fuck off, Hitler!
It's so good.
And he just, like, the way he, like, flies through the window is so funny.
Satisfying.
Yeah. Because this was PG-13, right? Mm-hmm. That's a game that I love is... PG-13, you're allowed, like, 1 fuck.
You're allowed 2.
2 fucks. I'll, like, pick movies, and I'm like, which of these characters deserves to say fuck? And Jojo deserved it, and he got it.
Yep.
He got the fuck. What's your final rating?
I think I'm gonna give it a 5 out of 5. This movie is so good.
Okay, yeah.
I really like this movie. It's emotional, it's funny. It feels really grounded in a whimsical way, which is unique. And... I feel like it depicts real life in a really challenging... It's a human depiction of a very challenging time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like that. I gave it, like, a 4.5 out of 5. It's a solid. It's a solid flick.
It's a solid flick. The filming is so good. Like, there's nothing...
Oh, yeah. From a completely technical standpoint, like, it's just fantastic anyway. And then you get into, like, the emotion and the, like, all of the rest of it.
Yeah.
I love the soundtrack in German. Like, the David Bowie in German over the final credits is iconic.
So good.
So good.
Okay.
So, yeah, that's Jojo Rabbit.
That's Jojo Rabbit. We've done it.
We did it. We made it. We made it through the J's.
We made it through the J's. That's pretty big.
Next episode is a Caitlin pick. It is a movie I'm absolutely fucking obsessed with. I'm gonna go absolutely feral. The brainworms I have are insane.
Yeah.
We're going to be talking about Karate Kid.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to be talking about just the first Karate Kid. I will be talking about the whole franchise and Cobra Kai. It's inevitable. I will keep it. I will rein myself in.
I did my best to keep it just to the movie and not all about
I will rein myself in.
You can do it.
So, when we come back for next episode, we're going to be talking about Karate Kid. The original, not the fucking Jaden Smith, Jackie Chan one.
Yeah.
Like the real Karate Kid. So, if you haven't already, go watch it. Or don't. I'm not your dad.
And follow us on socials.
Yeah, follow us on socials. We're at OK_but_listen on Instagram.
And Caitlin does a wonderful job of making that look beautiful.
Thank you. I'm a Canva king.
You are a Canva king. It looks very good.
Our Instagram was very dead because we were very dead, but we have risen.
We have risen from the grave.
We have risen from the grave just in time for Halloween-y time. We are zombies. But yeah, all right. Well, we'll see you for Karate Kid next time.
Yeah.
Bye.